Welcome to Kerusi Panas Sabah. You're here with Bridget Welch, and this is episode 4 of Hot Seats. And it's the first episode that we actually take a deep dive and look at particular seats and talk about them. It's still before November 15th, nomination date, when the exact number of candidates and who the candidates are and their affiliations are announced. But having gone to the ground multiple times in the northeast of Sabah, I'm going to take a bit of a risk as I want to talk about some of the major trends and issues as well as the seats. It's useful for us to pace out the conversations of the different regions, to be able to understand the dynamics on the ground and why Sabah politics is so interesting and so hot. I want to begin with something sweet. It's a treat, and that is the UFO. The UFO is a special pastry that we find in Sandakan. It's light custard with beautiful crumbly pastry and a lovely meringue. Delicious. It represents not only the sweetness and the charm of beautiful Sandakan, it also represents the era of the past. This part of Sabah, the Northeast, has so much history, charm, and it still has it. I'd like to highlight a heritage trail, which is a very long walk covering multiple sites. This has been community-driven, showcasing the very rich history that Sandakan has. I would please recommend for all of you to come and visit Sandakan. Spend some time. Sandakan comes from the word sanda, or to be pond. It's a Suluk word. But it has a history before that name. It was a city that was founded in 1874, and it was then called Elopura, beautiful city. It became the second capital of the British North Borneo Company in 1885. And it served as the capital for most of the central era of the colonial governance in Sabah from the 1880s all the way until 1946, 1947. At that time, the capital was moved to Justin before Elopura and Sandakan had been the capital. The capital moved after World War II because World War II was very destructive for Sandakan. Most of the city was destroyed. It's known for the horrific period of the death market, which was from Sandakan all the way to Ranao, 250 kilometers. There's a Sandakan Memorial Park that honors those who had to suffer during that period of time. Sandakan is also known as Little Hong Kong because of its interest in migration, the connection that Sandakan had to the global economy and to Hong Kong. In the contemporary environment, it's known for its access to nature, access to the orangutan and Sipuluk. You have the sun bears and conservation areas. From a perspective of visiting, it has so much to offer. There are around 500,000 people in this broad area, including Libaran and Sibuga. We also have a large number of multi-ethnic communities that make up the diversity. I've entitled the episode Northeast Neglect because there's the sense that this is a town that is suffering. Some people often say that the town is dying. Like many places across Sabah, particularly on the East Coast, the older part of town no longer has the vibrancy. There's been a movement, mostly led by the private sector, to have satellite towns that are a little bit further away. Some of this was driven by security, but a lot of this was driven by economic interest. So you have Pertama and other places in the East Coast, like Lahadato, to have satellite towns which have grown up. This has provided more choices and more opportunities, but at the same juncture, it's had an impact on the parts of the cities that have strong historical roots. The neglect that is felt is that Sandakan's economy no longer has the vibrancy that it had in the past. It grew largely from the timber industry. it's known also for other things, particularly its delicious seafood. But you have questions of infrastructure, the questions of roads, the questions of water, basically the caliber and maintenance of the city have been very much at the fore. These issues, which are legitimate, have come part of the discussions that I've had with many voters. They feel the sense that they are neglected vis-a-vis the rest of parts of Sabah and vis-a-vis the larger picture of Malaysia. This perhaps was brought to the fore in September, where we had multiple days of water shortages. This included HDOC, which is the Duchess of Kent Hospital, that you had water tanks being mobilized, services trying to be restored. But it illustrated for many voters the seriousness, the questions of infrastructure. This is compounded by many of the roads coming into Sandakan are not of the standards that they should be, particularly the construction of the Pan-Borneo Highway. This question of neglect comes into the assessment of the seats, whether or not they'll get representation that can address the problems that Sandakan is facing, whether or not they can restore their history of the past and how people see the past. Within that, I've identified 5 very important seats that tell us a story about the richness of what's going on in Sabah politics. All of these seats are very interesting in their own ways, and they are panas, hot. Let's start first with why I think Elopura and Tanjong Papat are interesting. First of all, what we're looking at analytically are 3 things. First, we're looking at the broader Chinese vote and the Chinese swing that might be taking place in Sabah. It's important to understand that the Chinese as a community vary by different region where they live. They're not the same in Tawa or in Sandakan or Peningao or in the KK. There are differences among them, not only in their composition, but their political outlook. Generally, the Chinese vote has been a situation of black and white. There's been a lot of support for one particular party. In places like Sandakan, we saw first a swing to the DAP in 2018, and then we saw a swing to Warasan, where the DAP was collaborating with them in what was known as Warasan Plus. And then in 2022, we saw a swing back to DAP. Question now is, will there be a swing to Warasan or to other parties, but particularly Warasan? How will the DAP maintain the Chinese support? When we see the Elopura, we see a rather intense contest. It looks to be the MP for Sandakan, DAP Representative Vivian Wong, will be contesting against Warasan's incumbent, who's been there since 2018, Calvin Chong. Calvin Chong was originally elected under DAP and then joined Warasan in 2022. But we also have other contenders like Yao Fu, who was a close ally and assistant to Frank Kuhn, which I'll come to in a moment. And we are likely to maybe even have other contenders join the Elopura contest. But the 2 big players are still MP Vivian and YB Calvin. This Warasan DAP contest is a very interesting one to watch across the state. Elopura has almost 40,000 voters. It's a very dynamic place, comprised of 42% Chinese, but there are also significant Bajau and Bugis communities. It was, as I mentioned, a BNC all through 2018, particularly Gerakan from 2004. Here, when you go to the shops and talk to the voters, they talk about these issues of who will be the representatives that is the best to service the area, to bring back the greatness of Sandakan. What we see are these 2 parties fighting for the Chinese vote. This is similar also in the other Sandakan seat of Tanjong Papat, which its incumbent is likely to run, but not under the DAP, but under KDM, a new party for this area. Frankie Poon, we also have the SAPB contesting there, as well as DAP and Warasan. Votes there are 39% Chinese, but we have almost 17,000 voters. What's interesting about Tanjong Papat, and even to a certain degree about Elopura, is that disproportionately these seats have a lot of older voters. Tanjong Papat has almost 30% of older voters. Now, this Chinese swing, this is the challenge. How much of this is going to be determined by the candidate, which are the individuals they like, how they assess their service? In Elopura, there's clearly going to be a choice between assessing MP versus Adun. It also is a test for Warasan, how successful and the challenges they had to deliver things while being in opposition. And the questions voters are asking is, will they be able to get to government? Support for Warasan is driven by a very strong narrative of local party, fighting for different resources. So this challenge of perceptions of the voter, party identity versus service versus the personality, keep in mind, still large number of voters, but people know who their candidates are because both of the candidates in Elopura, for example, are people who have been serving these constituencies. There is these tensions. What makes Elopura and Tanjong Papat also interesting is that there have also been some internal divisions within the DAP, as there's been a generational transformation of the party, as younger leaders have been given seats and older leaders have not. And this has made for a more complex competition. And looking at both of these seats, Elopura and Tanjong Papat, it's going to be hot. Close by is the seat of Sekong in Batu Sapi. And this tests not so much the Chinese swing, although Chinese voters comprise almost 20%. So again, if there is a swing away from Pakatan Harapan parties towards Warasan, this could impact the outcome. But what is interesting is, again, the test of Warasan having the seat, being in the incumbent in opposition. And this is where the Calon factor goes against the ideas of the party and the narrative of the party. There are almost 27,000 voters in this seat. That's on many areas around the water, living in houses on stilts, but there are also other houses that have been transformed, new districts that have been built over time. This seat has had a long history of being first in the Alliance, then at Berjaya, then an USNO. It was an UMNO seat until 2018. In 2018, it was won by Warasan, by a man called Arfan Asgali, who's now left Warasan, but he did not get elected in 2020. The man selected for Warasan was a man called Alia Sani. He's a dynamic religious scholar who has a big social media profile. This is a seat that is really important for Warasan to win. It is an incumbent seat, this along with Gunggung. The question becomes, being in opposition, has been able to affect positively or negatively the support for the Calon? The contenders here are among GRS, which is the incumbent state coalition, Gabungan Rakyat Sabah, as well as UMNO. The GRS candidate is still a little bit up in the air. There was talk that USNO would contest here. This may or may not happen as part of the GRS coalition. The person on the ground who most voters talk about is a man called Firdaus Khan, who is representing Batu Sapi for the GRS. He's the Deputy Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture in Malaysia. He's known for going to the ground and servicing the area. There's been some of the constituencies where he's been able to deliver land, which is one of the areas that is important for the state government. Across many seats in South, land issues and land grants are very critical. There's a deficit in some of the promises, as we can expect with all politicians, but there have been a lot of deliverables. This is the type of contest that we see in Sabah, this splitting of the Malay vote, the splitting of the divisions, the real intense fight between GRS and UMNO and Warasan. Looking like UMNO will be contesting a young man called Muhammad Zarif Aizat Samsudin. He's the son of the former MP from 2004 to 2018, Samsudin Yaya. And this is interesting because we see that name recognition is very important. People remember the full issues that are coming through a lot of these seats here. How do you remember the past? How do you see the past and what that will be for the future? We see service, party identity playing itself off in this highly competitive seat, such as Sekong. The other major fights politically in this Northeast area are happening in Libaran. It's a different Malay ground, disproportionately, although Chinese voters comprise 14% of the electorate, and there are considerable shares of Dusun voters as well that make up the ethnic composition that is very pluralistic. What's interesting about the two seats that I highlight, Sungai Manila and Sungai Sibuga, is that they are both very mixed communities, in part because they are settler communities that were brought in from other parts of Sabah. So we can see mixes of Bajau and Bugis and Suluk. Many of them helped to build this little town of Sungai Manila. Sungai Sibuga, which is near the airport. Sungai Manila has about 18,500 voters. It's largely going to be a battle between UMNO and PGRS. And Sungai Sibuga has around 38,000 voters. An intense contest between Warasan, PGRS, UMNO, and Pakatan National is also contesting in both of these sets of seats. Pakatan National also is trying to contest intensely in this area to put itself on the map. Let's pull out about Sungai Manila. For those people following Sabah, they will know that Libaran was a long-standing area of the current governor, KYT Musa Ahmad. This issue will be played out in terms of how he's perceived in these constituencies, and also his importance traditionally within UMNO, but now in terms of building his own political base across political parties. In Sungai Manila, we have his son, Hasim Mubarak Musa, contesting against UMNO, likely to be one of the grassroots members within UMNO, Zaini Tukson. He may contest in Sungai Sibuga. These individuals, Suhaimi in particular, was seen to offset some of Musa Ahmad's influence politically in this area as the battles within UMNO started to heat up from 2018. The mood on the ground for the candidate Hasim has been to push for Jasa Musa Ahmad, to remember the merit, the services of the TYT in the places like Libaran. This goes against the pitting of a machinery of what has been traditionally an UMNO seat for a very long time. It's created for UMNO, has been based on the divisions with UMNO, reflected the fortunes of UMNO. These seats, Sungai Manila and Sungai Sibuga, are fascinating to watch. Of the two, Sungai Sibuga is even more larger number of voters, larger ethnic configuration. I'm watching it very closely. Sungai Manila has had some of the changes, but then there is the question of whether or not that development is continued. In Sungai Sibuga, similarly, we have considerable dynamism, but this is a place that can have so much more potential from a perspective of economic and social transformation. Hot. That battle between UMNO and PGRS is intense. The battle between DAP and Warasan, the battle between Warasan, GRS, and UMNO. These things are playing out on the northeast of Sabah. They're not quite yet the UFOs or flying objects. Some of this is not so sweet as that light pastry, but it is about the imagination of what was sweet of the past, the former glory. We have different contentions about the nostalgia of the past, the era of Musa Ahmad and all of its strengths and weaknesses. We have the contention about UMNO, the contentions about DAP, different visions and contention about the glory and who can help to restore the past and bring back Sandakan to its charm, to its status that it once had. Party identity, divisions within parties, personality, the Chalon factors, the individuals, are all at play in this northeast part of Sabah. It's hot, it's wonderful, it's charming, it's sweet, it's light, and also quite heavy. Thank you for joining me here on Kerusi Panas Sabah, Episode 4. Keep an eye out on what's happening on nomination day when all the final candidates and mixes are coming in.